Hey everybody, Spacewizard here. For this week's video, I want to talk to you guys about the Wild format, why it exists, what the current state of it is, and where it's headed. Now I assume most of you know already, but if you're new to Hearthstone, the Wild format is a separate format from Standard where you can play with all of the Hearthstone cards that have ever been released, as opposed to just the most recently released ones. There are two major reasons for Wild existing, the first being that content you pay for can't just simply go away as more content gets released. People do not want to feel like their money is being wasted, so it just makes sense to let people continue to play with what they've paid for outside of the competitive format. The second and most important reason Wild has to exist is that unless you take cards out of circulation, the game will just get too broken, and in the worst case scenario, it will get too stale. Whenever a new set of cards gets added to the game, the power level of every deck in the game goes up. Now, certain decks may get more powerful than other decks, which would make it appear as though certain decks have gotten weaker, but what's really happening is the decks that get the least amount of support in each expansion just can't keep up with how much better the rest of the decks in the game are getting. So when decks get stronger, they obviously get more efficient and consistent, which does one of two things. It either makes the game too fast or too slow. If we traveled into the future and built the two best decks we could, one aggro deck and one control deck, out of every Hearthstone card that will ever exist, because you would have so many good cards at your disposal, the aggro deck would end the game before your opponent gets a chance to do anything, and the control deck would prevent your opponent from doing anything for the full duration of the game. If you just keep adding cards to the game, then eventually decks are going to reach absolute peak efficiency and break the game completely. So taking cards out of circulation and outright preventing any deck from ever reaching peak efficiency keeps the game balanced. So that's why Wild exists, but what is the current state of Wild? Well, right now, nobody is really interested in playing Wild, and again, I think there are two main reasons for this. First, nobody has any idea what to do in Wild because nobody is playing it. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. There are so few people playing Wild that once you get higher up in the ranks on the ladder, you'll often find yourself queuing into the exact same opponent over and over again simply because nobody else is playing. If I asked you to name at least 3 top-tier decks in Standard right now, you could probably give me a reasonable answer. If I asked you to name just one top-tier deck in Wild, you would probably have to guess. So there's no net decking, there's no meta reports, and most importantly, there's no players. Anyone that's looking to get into ranked Wild pretty much has to go in blind. And the second reason I think Wild isn't popular is because the barrier to entry and incentives for playing Wild are totally out of whack. Not only does it take more time or money to get all of the cards you're going to need to play Wild, but it also takes more research and knowledge on account of the much larger card pool. With Standard, you're looking at 6 to 10 card sets max. With Wild, you're looking at every card set ever released, and that on its own is more than enough to make a casual player lose all interest. But when you've finally crafted all the cards you need to build your Wild deck, the rewards you get from the ranked ladder on Wild are exactly the same as the rewards from the Standard ladder. In fact, they aren't just exactly the same, they are literally the same. You can only get rewarded for the highest rank you obtained on either ladder during a season. So if in one season you reached Legend in both Standard and Wild, the rewards you would get are exactly the same as if you had only reached Legend on one of the two ladders. The time you spend playing on the other ladder yields no rewards. Furthermore, Standard has the added benefit of its competitive aspect. Why bother playing Wild when it takes more time to build a deck for, you can't play it competitively, and you don't get rewarded for it? So what is the future of the Wild format? Well, it may seem like a failed format at the moment, but I actually have very high hopes for it going forward. While I would like to see some sort of a separate reward system for playing on the Wild ladder, I don't think that's entirely necessary because of the main draw of the Wild format, which is its super efficient decks. Right now, the only card sets available in Wild that aren't available in Standard are Curse of Naxxramas and Goblins vs. Gnomes. In a year's time, the amount of sets only available for use in Wild are going to have more than doubled, and that number is just going to keep increasing as time goes on. The format will be going through major changes to the point where it will actually be a completely different game from the Standard format, rather than just sort of a bizarro Standard with Dr. Boom and Piloted Shredder. The kinds of decks that you're going to be able to build in Wild are going to be so obscenely broken and fun to use that I'd be willing to bet that there's going to be a huge surge in streamers and YouTubers making videos of the kinds of crazy combos you're going to be able to pull off, which will draw people in and actually get them interested in the format. And if Blizzard adds some sort of extra incentive for playing on the Wild ladder, even if it's just a free card pack occasionally, kind of like how Tavern Brawls are incentivized, then the format will almost certainly succeed in the long run. That's it for this week's video, guys, but don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back next week with another new video, but until then, you can check out Hearthhead.com or either of its social media pages for all sorts of Hearthstone-related content. See you next time, everybody.